Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to play with guar gum and stencils to dye a sock blank. You might recognize this sock blank from Dyepot Weekly number 104. In that video I dyed two blanks at the same time, low immersion with some pastel colors in a steam pan. You can find a link for the video below. This blank already has some cool texture to it, but the background overall is fairly neutral. And so I would like to use guar gum, which is a thickening agent, plus some acid dyes in a more deep saturated color with some of these stencils to create a pattern on top of this base. Last year in a live stream as part of the Sock Blank Special 2, I played with guar gum and did some comparisons of with guar gum and stenciling without guar gum on a sock blank using this bird stencil and this really cool DNA stencil that a fan made for me. I would like to give a shout out to a member of the ChemKnits community, Jess Segrest, for pointing me in their direction of this awesome lace stencil at Michael's. I will not be using this particular stencil today, but I have a feeling it'll be making an appearance in a future live stream. The rest of the stencils I either found on Amazon or at Michael's. When I bought some of the big stencils over here, I sort of forgot how big the blank was, and so they don't necessarily cover it completely. So I'm gonna have to do a lot of thinking about which one I want to use on the blank. I think it helps to use something to cover the edges of the stencil to sort of imagine what it might look like. I like the looks of both of these, but I'm tempted to go for this slightly more intricate pattern because I feel like there's more sort of spots that could definitely get overtaken by, you know, the way I'm applying the dye and things like that. So we'll be able to see how well it works. I am pre-soaking the blank in some tap water with 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. So that way it is nice and acidic. So once we're stenciling, the colors will maybe start striking pretty quickly. It has been a long time since I've used guar gum. I've only tried it once, but we are going to start making a guar gum stock solution that we can then dilute for our project. The first time I used guar gum, I used a 1/4 teaspoon of the guar gum in 8 ounces or 1 cup of water. Then I added the food coloring directly to that, so the guar gum didn't get diluted much further. But I already have a 1% stock solution of the acid dye I want to use, so I want to make a more concentrated guar gum solution. So let's see if we can add a whole teaspoon of guar gum to a cup of water. Now, right now I am using a bunch of food safe equipment between, you know, my measuring spoons and my magic bullet, but then once I have the stock made, I'll transfer it into a container that can become one that is non-food safe. Let's see if I can get this last bit out. The reason for using the magic bullet is that I want to be able to have things thoroughly mixed so I don't have any clumps, because I've heard that if you have like a clump of the guar gum on your yarn, it can be hard to get out. Okay, that is thick. This is like almost a paste. I am going to add another cup of water to here to dilute this. Now we have a 1/2 teaspoon of the guar gum per 1 cup or 8 ounces of water, and you can see if I dip my fingers in, they are nicely coated by this. This is sort of thicker. You know, I'm not seeing if I can get a drip. It's definitely a lot thicker, much more like a paint type consistency, but it's also not quite solid. Guar gum is an excellent thickener if you want to use food coloring or acid dyes, but it will react with fiber reactive dyes. So if you want to thicken those, then you'll need to use something else, because those dyes can actually bind to the guar gum itself instead of binding to the fiber, and that's not what you want. For our dye, let's start with 1/4 cup of our guar gum solution. Goodness, maybe I think we actually want 1/2 cup. And then we're going to add 1/4 cup approximately of our 1% stock solution of Jacquard Brown. And you can see just by pouring that in how that is not mixing super well immediately. This mixture is now thicker, a bit thicker than what I used in the first time I tried this. If I had a dye safe blender, then it could be worth using that, but it is mixing relatively well. My cup's a little small, which is why I want to be careful, but I would say we're just about ready to start painting our blank. I think this blank might have ended up blocking itself a bit too much, but our stencil now fits pretty perfectly. I don't think it'll quite fit 3 times, so I have a choice to let it overlap in the middle and do one end, then the other end, and then the middle. But let's first try stenciling at one end and see where we end up. Alright, so I'm sort of stepping into my paint, wiping off my brush. Then now, I guess I'm going to just start going for the center and sort of lightly dabbing this on. Sort of going with the stencil a little bit. And it's definitely thick and not quite as dark as I think I was hoping for. But I'm going to see, you know, how this goes with these shapes. The nice thing is that as I am pressing down this dye, we are in fact getting, the stencil is sort of locking itself down. I think that I will need to rinse the stencil in between applications. Oh no, oh no. There, I accidentally picked it up. What I don't know is if at any of these points I'm getting dye underneath the stencil, but we'll see how this goes. This is only, I guess, the second really day that I've attempted anything quite like this. I do want to make sure, shoot, over here, that it is straight. I need a paper towel. Okay. I think I mentioned I squeezed out most of the water as I was starting out, and that is because I really wanted to not let these colors spread. I wanted them to sort of stay put where I place them. My work surface is protected with plastic wrap. This is so that way when we go steam it, I can just wrap it up in that plastic wrap and go straight to the steaming. What I don't know as I'm going here and adding all this color, I have no idea how deep the penetration from the stenciling will be on the blank itself. I do know, and the reason why I wanted a slightly higher guar gum concentration this time from the first time I did it was that some of the tiny details on the birds were lost from my stenciling because, you know, the color just sort of went underneath some of those thinner sections. So I'm hoping that that will not happen here. But I am trying to like hold things down. Oh dear. The fun thing is I think once you get the technique down, you could totally stamp on like a gradient and do different colors at one end versus the other. The spot where you definitely need to press these stencils down more is at these edges, because that's where there are a tiny bit more gaps in between the stencil itself and the blank. In the middle, it's pretty well pressed down. I'm also really curious how this is gonna look dry, because if it's gonna like relax back a bit or what. Here we go for this first round. I'm going to carefully peel this up and go wash it. And hey, that actually worked pretty well. I'm actually really happy with that. Some of the very smallest details, some of those like more horizontal lines in the center are gone, but you can definitely see a really cool design. Some of these like big tips, those didn't really make it through. I guess they did kind of in some places, but the smallest, pointiest details that aren't connected are the hardest ones to actually capture, like maybe some of the curlicues in there, but a lot of this detail did stay. I am now going to stencil the other end. I'm going to leave the middle for the very end, so that way maybe we can try to space things nicely. But I am going to go and, using the same kind of thing, try to stencil on top of this. That took about 3.5 minutes to do. Now let's remove our stencil. And I think I'm already improving a bit from the first one, but I'm gonna go wash the stencil. This isn't bad at all. In fact, I think that this is really beautiful. And now I have rinsed off the stencil, and then I did pat both sides with a paper towel. And I'm going to try to position it so that I can do a third one, and it's reasonably positioned with the other two. It might touch in the center, but that's okay. And honestly, if it didn't fit, I could probably have blocked it a tiny bit to make it fit. But I think that we're in decent shape. Now, let's do the last stencil. And the final one, I think I probably did my best on this one with some of the details. There's some details that definitely don't show up as well over here that show up better in this middle portion. I think I got a little bit better. This is a really pretty tile, and I'm thrilled with how this turned out. I initially really wanted the brown to be a lot darker. I wanted it to feel very like Hershey's chocolate or something, but the contrast between the brown and the background of the blank works. Like, there's no question that the design stands out, and even if it looks a bit paler when it dries, it's still going to look phenomenal. Now we can use the same plastic wrap that we were using to protect our work surface to, oh dear. Phew, okay. We can use the same plastic wrap that we were using to protect our work surface to start wrapping up our blank. Now, thankfully, there is not a lot of water in here, so I'm not expecting this design to squish very much as I roll it up. Okay. The plastic wrap will keep different parts of the blank from touching each other. You will notice that the penetration of the dye seems to be fairly light. It is definitely goes through, but you don't see it as sharp as you do on the front side, which means that we're gonna get some dark brown speckles on this. This is my dedicated dye steam pot. I'm gonna pop that in, cover it up, and I am gonna steam this for 30 minutes. It is up, and I'm gonna turn off the heat and leave the blank here to cool completely before we unwrap it and wash it. Let's unwrap and then wash our blank. Ooh, so far so good. Instead of using cool water today, I'm using slightly warm water. In part because I want any guar gum to dissolve out of the blank, but also because it's really, really cold outside. And I don't think I want to put my hands in the ice cold water. There was no color on the plastic wrap, which is always reassuring. And from just this first little rinse here, I'm not seeing any color bleeding. So, woohoo, woohoo! Our color is in the blank. Now, I don't think we used too much guar gum, so I don't think there'll be any problem rinsing it out. But I do think we will need a few more rinses than normal. I'm going to add some clear dish soap. And yeah, we'll be doing a few more rinses like this. Then I will lay this flat to dry. And we'll come back and look at the finished blank. Isn't this amazing? When I was stenciling, I had blocked this open a bit. So that way I was able to use the whole square stencil, the 12 by 12 stencil on the blanks. Clearly it's now more of a rectangle. So if you were doing some kind of stencil where the proportion was really important, you could end up with a little bit of distortion. But this design looks so stunning. The lines are sharp and crisp, and there's no, when I feel it, like I don't feel any like guar gum residue or anything like that. When I flip it over to the back side, that's where stuff starts to get a bit interesting. We're gonna have some speckles in here. These brown patches are not gonna be super long. And the way that I can know this is that we do not have color penetration all the way through the blank. If you zoom in, you can see some areas that are definitely darker than others, but when you're looking at this wrong side of the fabric, you see a lot of those original colors coming through, which means that as this is unraveled, you will get flecks of color, and this will be broken up in a really fun way. See, stenciling a blank like this adds so many possibilities. You could put affirmations on a blank, and so, or a love letter, and then when someone unravels it and turns it into socks, they know that that message is there in the fiber, even though you can't see it anymore. And I just think that that is really cool. Of course, you could also stencil a completed knit garment. There's nothing to stop you from that, but whew, it's a lot less like scary when you know something will be unraveled in the end. I know that when unraveled, there will be a gradient based on the background colors, and I've actually unraveled that yarn, and you could see how that progression ends up looking in another episode of Dyepot Weekly. As for the brown, these specks and splotches and speckles are going to be non-repeating. I mean, I guess kind of repeating because this whole design does sort of repeat, but there are rows that have areas that have less brown and areas that have more. And so that will give another asymmetric element, even though I guess technically there's symmetry, but it adds another element and sort of gradient kind of thing to the finished yarn. I am so excited with how this blank turned out, and I'm planning on listing it in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop intact. I think that it is just beautiful, and it really could be a wonderful gift or so much fun for someone to open up, and the experience of unraveling it is something that I do want to be able to share. If the customer requests that I unravel this and dekink it for them, then I will happily either update the end of the video if the video has not been published yet, or I will add an update in the comments and in the video description with pictures on Instagram. Furthermore, I will absolutely have more stencils in the future that I will unravel myself. There are a lot of stencils from the Sock Blank Special 2 that I unraveled in live streams, and I'll give a link to that recap in the video description, so that way you can get a sense of how these types of stencilings, not this one exactly, but in general stencilings, what kind of patterns they give onto yarn. What kinds of patterns they can give onto yarn. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. There is a lot more that I need to do with guar gum, from more stencil exploration, maybe looking at some finer details and seeing if I can get those onto blanks, and then also using guar gum to just hand paint skeins of yarn, because you can really get some really sharp application of color using this thickener. Finally, you should really check out the ChemKnits Patreon. Patrons get behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, early access to new videos, and sometimes going forward, I will be posting random polls asking the patrons for their advice on how I should proceed with a moment in a video. And I will say that this blank made an appearance in one such poll back in February. You'll find links in the video description and iCard. Thank you so much everyone for watching, and I look forward to playing more with color with all of you in the next video. Bye everyone!